Okay, welcome everyone to Advisory Design Panel for the District of Squamish, this 30th day of April 2020. We'll start the meeting by acknowledging that we are holding the meeting electronically, but on Squamish Nation traditional territory, which is where Squamish is located. The first item that I will do is read out our procedures for electronic participation. And it says, committee members attending the meeting electronically are required to advise the chair of the meeting of the following circumstances. A, when the committee member disconnects and or reconnects, enters or exits the meeting so that this can be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. B, committee members are to identify themselves when they advise the chair that they wish to be placed on the speakers list. C, with respect to a vote, committee members are only required to say nay to a vote. So anyone against, they would speak up. No statement is required if the member is in favor. Item D is committee members shall put the telephone or computer on mute unless they wish to speak. E is committee members shall be involved in and participate in the meeting. F, committee members shall text the CAO or corporate officer if they have technical difficulty with their telephone or computer. And shall I provide your number again, Jonas, in case somebody drops off?
Yes, sure. I'll be all the way through the meeting.
Okay, so if anyone wants to record this in case they drop off, the number is 604-815-7829. And then item G on our procedures is the meeting shall be recessed for up to 10 minutes if a technical difficulty occurs on the district side, which results in the committee member being unable to connect to the meeting. And that's the procedures.
John, can I just do a quick reminder? I see Kevin Shoemaker still has got his video on. Kevin, could you turn off your video until it's your turn to speak?
Thanks, everyone. Okay, we'll go to item 2 of the agenda, which is adoption of this agenda. Can I have someone move on that? Just by a show of hands would be fine. Sarah, to move. Second is Carlos. Anyone against? No one against, so we are adopted. Item 3 is minutes from the meeting at April 16th, 2020. Any comments from anyone on those minutes? No comments. Do we have someone to move to adopt them? Sarah moves. Second. And show of hands would be great. I'm just looking at everyone's on here. Carlos is second. Anyone against? No one against. So we've adopted those minutes from the last meeting. The first item up for business is Garibaldi Springs, Lot 8 Development Permit Application, 2100 Newport Ridge Drive, and we'll hand off to our planner.
So I can't see the presentation. It's Susan Stratus. Oh, here it is. I'll just wait a second before I start. My name is Susan Stratus. I'm the planner working with the district on this project. And I have just 3 slides to walk through, and then I will turn the presentation over to Polygon, the applicants. So the project that we're looking at is Lot A at the north end of the Garibaldi Springs site. Next slide, please. Just very briefly, looking at the background of this project, the slide in front of us shows the entire Garibaldi Springs site, and the parcel A is at the top at the north end. The rezoning for this project was adopted in October 2018 after a fairly lengthy process. And the outcome of that process was 310 units are permitted total on the property, broken into the 4 parcels that are shown in the little arrows on the drawing. The phasing begins at the north end with access from Dowd Drive, and the subsequent phases have access from the south end of Newport Ridge Drive. The overall density within these residential parcels is relatively low, roughly 12 units to the acre. And the majority of the overall parcel, 78%, is going to be dedicated to the district for ownership for park and ecological reserve. So there's a fairly substantial district ownership here. Next slide. And I just briefly wanted to talk about some of the special conditions for this parcel A that were built into the zoning bylaw and also into the land development agreement. As we went through the rezoning process, it was clear that the residents who lived to the north and to the south of this parcel had a number of concerns with views, with landscaping, with slopes that had to be addressed. So just very quickly, starting from the top here, this parcel has a maximum of 60 lots permitted, or 60 units, pardon me. At the north end, there is height-restricted landscaping within the building setback, not to be more than 1.5 meters mature height. The cottage area that's circled is to be single-story cottages only with a maximum 6-meter height for pitched roofs. In the middle of the site, townhouse units with a typical maximum height of 10.68 meters are permitted. And then as you move to the south boundary of this parcel, the two unit dwellings are limited to a maximum 9-meter height. At the south end, there's also a no-go zone where you're not allowed to build, and I think the project team will describe that in a bit more detail. The applicants are also required to bring a geotechnical report confirming the stabilization measures for the banks that surround this property. So I won't go into any more detail. I think we've reviewed this project as mentioned in the ADP report, and it largely meets the DP guidelines, and it does meet all of the RM4 zoning conditions, and no variances are requested. And with that, I will turn this over to Polygon to finish the presentation.
Okay, thanks, Susan. My name is Kevin Shoemaker, and good afternoon, panel. I'm Vice President of Development at Polygon Homes, and I'd just like to take a minute to introduce our team. And Susan did some of the overview that I was going to do, so I'll just touch on a few things. But joining me today is the architect, who's Mark Blackwood with Acoustics, and Bruce Hemstock of PWL, who is the landscape architect. And as Susan mentioned, this is 119 acres, and we went through an extensive rezoning process. It took a couple of years, and particularly a lot of it focused on this first lot. So a lot of these rules were put in place after quite a bit of public engagement. But just to talk briefly about the overall site, of the 119 acres, oh, sorry, can I get the next slide? And actually one more now. Next slide. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so just to quickly show a little more clearly, on the right-hand side, the green area is the contiguous 90-acre ecological reserve. The orange areas are parks, and the blue areas are the townhome communities. And at the very top, denoted with A, is the one that we're talking about today. And just in the broader context, in the black and white aerial there, this site is the former golf course just north of what I call the Canadian Tire Mall on the east side of Highway 99. So I think Susan covered everything else, so I'll turn it over to Mark Blackwood from Acoustics, and he can walk us through the architecture. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Mark Blackwood with Acoustics Architecture. Could I get the next slide, please? So I'd like to sort of dive in, and I apologize with this format. I think it's messing up some of the formatting here. A touch on the architectural vision for Lot A at Garibaldi Springs. And to start off, this community was envisioned as very much a pocket neighborhood, which has kind of been made popular by Ross Chapman, for those who are familiar. And it's really about creating communities that have kind of a close-knit and kind of collective culture and sort of an architectural expression that allows residents to engage with their neighbors. Kids can go out and play, and really encourages social interaction. With that, the architectural character itself, we've kind of coined this idea of a mountain modern architectural style that really begins to pick up on the sort of natural environment that Lot A resides in. The community is aimed at creating a variety of housing choice and also sort of creating connectivity throughout the community itself and beyond. And then also incorporating sustainability measures to ensure the vision that was set out in the rezoning process is carried through into the individual developments of the community. Next slide, please. So this sheet here shows where we began in terms of our inspiration for the architectural character, and it's really about expressing natural tone materials that fit in well with the environment, large expressive roofs and roof overhangs, and kind of expressing kind of large glazed openings to take advantage of natural light, views, and connections to some of these outdoor spaces that we'll be speaking of. Next slide, please.
Hey, Mark, can I interrupt? Sorry, is everyone also, am I the only one that doesn't see any images right now?
I'm seeing an image.
Or is everybody
seeing an image.
Okay. I can't see it. All right. That may be just me.
Then the next sheet here kind of hones in on some specific details and some inspiration in terms of how we intend on sort of crafting these details, how the intersections work of how materials join to kind of create a modern language and expression, and how this architectural language can begin to extend to the outside to create beautiful covered patios and porches, which will become kind of critical with this whole pocket neighborhood concept. Next slide, please. Just an overview of the overall site plan. As noted, we've got Dowwood Drive to the north, a new strata road that will be put in running north-south along the eastern edge of the property. And the site is really divided up into sort of two benches responding to the existing topography. The upper bench is the clustering of cottages around the central residential green, and the lower benches are three-story townhomes with a community green at the far end. I will note the three-story townhomes are 2 stories on the uphill side and 3 stories on the downhill side, so they're set into the slope. And then 2 new strata roads running east-west, one to access the cottages to the north, and then another east-west which connects the 3-story townhomes. I'll skip over this because I know landscape will dive a little deeper into some of the sort of the site planning and landscape elements. Next slide, please. Just from an overall connectivity point of view, the idea is to create good pedestrian connectivity through the site. One is a looping system around the central residential green in the cottage lots, and then also a sidewalk which will run east-west in front of the duplexes that border the southern edge of the site out to the far west. That Bruce from PWL will speak about more. Next slide, please. So this section here, and primarily the image at the bottom of the screen, is presented here to sort of demonstrate really the massing concept for the site. The site is kind of working with the existing terrain as best we can, As Susan mentioned in her presentation, the cottage lots, which are more to the left of the section, are single-story units bordering the residential green, and then the 3-story townhomes set into the slope are further to the right. So what this demonstrates is that the homes to the north still maintain their clear views over the site, as they're elevated 4 to 6 meters above Lot A, and the homes to the south are well down the embankment, and in addition to the no-go zone and the other measures that were spoken about, very limited impact to sort of privacy or oversight into rear yards is achieved. Next slide, please. And then just a couple of views. The two larger images, I think, demonstrate, to the right of the screen, you can begin to see some of the homes that are set up. Those are the existing RS1 single-family homes to the north, and you can see how they're up on the fill, essentially, 4 to 6 meters above the site. This photo is taken from the upper bench, and then the homes down below are not even perceivable from this part of the site. Next slide, please. So diving into the architecture itself, the first row of homes are the affordable cottages, kind of along the northern edge of the site. 4 homes, each with a secondary suite. And as you can see here, the architectural style and modern architecture that we're trying to achieve really expresses varied roof lines in these shed roofs, generous overhang, and the use of materials that really blend in well with sort of the natural setting of Lot A. Feature materials such as timber at the entries, exposed rafter tails in these zones as well, metal roofs and rain chains, all kind of add to this contemporary kind of modern mountain architecture that we're going for. And then the cladding material is a combination of hardy shingle, horizontal hardy plank siding, and stone features as well. Next slide. Just a blow up of one of the front entries, just to get a little better sense of the attention that's being paid to the entry experiences. Here we see the wood timbers being featured along with beams and exposed rafter tails, the metal roofs, and just creating this nice sense of a generous, welcoming entry stoop for each one of the homes in the cottage area. Next slide, please. Just a quick overview of the floor plan. Again, the A unit, which is the affordable cottage, is a 900 square foot unit. It's an adaptable suite, 3 bedrooms, and its adjacent secondary suite is a 600 square foot 2-bedroom unit. Next slide, please. The next row of homes, the cottages or the Type C homes, express a similar architectural style with the expressive shed roofs with large overhangs. And I think one thing I didn't mention in the previous cottages as well is if we look at the lower 2 images, the idea of creating these generous covered outdoor decks that front onto the central residence green. So it's really all about having these outdoor spaces that are visually and physically connected to that central community green, which is really the heart of the neighborhood. Next slide, please. Much like the previous cottages, again, a view of the front entry. In this instance, it's more of a front entry porch, but still carries through the same ideas in terms of the expressive timber posts, metal connection details at the bases and the post caps. Continue that theme that we saw in the previous homes. Next slide, please. So these are a little under 1,200 square feet, 2-bedroom unit, adaptable suite, open concept, kitchen, dining, living, and then the 2 bedrooms and associated bathrooms to the right. Next slide, please. So this perspective here really starts to sort of drive home this idea of these, homes with their patios and front porches, all kind of spilling out to this central green. Bruce will kind of dive in deeper in terms of what this space is really envisioned to be, but this perspective really kind of describes how these homes are creating this pocket neighborhood within Lot A. Next slide, please. The next row of homes are the three-story townhomes. Again, 2 stories from the uphill and 3 stories on the downhill side. Again, sort of varied roof lines, both in shed roofs, but also front to back pitched roofs are seen in this image. A color scheme that is varied to sort of break down and create an individual expression for each unit. In this image, you can see in the perspective specifically, you can see how stone is used in some of the corner kind of more visible areas, along with glass, more modern architectural garage doors. So that'll sure to be a feature on the site as well. And these homes are sort of broken down into sort of smaller groupings with creating space in between. So your experience driving down the Strata Road is a nice kind of fine scale of building blocks. Next slide, please. Just a closer view of the front entry. This is a paired entry condition, picking up on the same type of detailing, and just a closer view of some areas where we're incorporating stone and the accent garage doors. Next slide, please. These homes have side-by-side parking within a garage, main floor, kitchen, dining, living, and then 3 bedrooms on the uppermost floor. These are 1,450 square foot, 3 bedrooms. Next slide, please. And then the final homes that line the southern border of the site are the Type D homes, which are duplex units. The lower image or elevation shows the 2-story elevation from the Strata Road, and carries through the theme of these expressive roof lines, exposed rafter tails at the roofs, and kind of architectural brackets, creating variation along the streetscape through various color schemes, and also even varying where we use the accent garage doors, glass versus solid, creates that variation. And in between the homes are the kind of the access points to the front door, front entry of the home. And then the top left image illustrates the downhill side, where we have the 3-story elevation with generous rear yards, which set back the homes from the residents down below, and also large decks coming off of the second level. Next slide, please. And then just a close-up view of the entry into the duplex home. The second, the upper level cantilevers over the front entry, creating cover, and then also creates an opportunity to create some expression with these double timber posts, and again, kind of carrying through that language of exposed metal connectors at the base and at the cap of these posts, and then also a bold color front entry doors. Next slide, please. The lower floors on the left are kind of a relatively kind of flexible basement area with a walkout to a yard. The main floor has a double side-by-side parking in the garage, open concept living, dining, kitchen, and then the third floor has the 3 bedrooms. Next slide, please. variation on the duplex, very similar. Next slide, please. And then just in closing for the architectural portion, the idea of creating sustainability on the site carried through a lot of the vision that carried over from the rezoning. This development will adhere to step 3 of the building code, and also feature EV charging for each of the homes. And Bruce will also get into sort of areas where we're looking at stormwater retention and kind of dealing with sustainability within the landscape. So with that, I'll turn that over to Bruce from PWL. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. If we could go to the next slide. I wanted to start off by just going back a little bit and looking at our site a number of years ago when it was the 14th hole. And just to remind, although we've talked a little bit about the grade change, but just to kind of remind everyone what we're trying to achieve and what we're dealing with the landscape. Dowwood Drive is up here and Rock Ridge Place down below. And we talked about creating that 4 to 6 meter grade change happening along the top edge here. And that sort of creates the benches that allow us to have the first phase of Garibaldi Springs come into place. So that's kind of where we're starting. If we go to the next slide, we'll see how we're getting to where we are now. So we have essentially 4 areas in the landscape. On the northeast corner, of course, is the Pocket neighborhood, which Mark introduced with its residential green. And then the double row of townhomes along the lower entry road. And then up in the northwest corner, or the top part of the slide, is the community green. And those are the components that make up the landscape. And let's dig into that a little bit deeper by going to the next slide, please. We talked a little bit about connectivity, and I think it's worth reiterating that the real goal for the entire Garibaldi Springs was to have, and that's the image on the far right-hand side of the whole site, this really connected neighborhood, even though there's a lot of forest that's separating each of the communities from each other and from the adjacent residential clusters. The idea that you can move freely north-south through Garibaldi Springs from our first phase up in the top of the screen all the way down to the big accessible park and hotel, down to the townhome public open space down in the bottom of the site, even connecting with Newport Ridge Drive and that adjacent community, as well as making sure that we're actually connecting to the existing trailheads that are east of our site. So that was the key thing at Garibaldi Springs. Sort of specific to the first phase, it was really important to us that it's an accessible phase, that all of the pathways slope at less than 5%. They're all hard surface. So coming in off that new entry road, 2.5 meter wide sidewalk that allows pedestrians to connect into our new neighborhood on 1.5 meter wide, again, hard surface sidewalks. So a very accessible and a very connected neighborhood. Now let's go to the next slide, please. We also started with images, just precedent images of what we thought this community would like to, wants to look like. And the top row of images are from Ross Chapin's book, actually, and examples in Seattle of a pocket neighborhood. And I have to say that they just really rang true to us in the sense of that sense of community, the sense of neighborhood, but also how the landscape helps to contribute to that. How the pathways are lined with planting, how the connection to the verandas, how both the landscape, the built form, and the people that inhabit these spaces all do it in a way that evokes community. The second row from the top talks about some of the furnishings and other elements, and I think what's important to us is that the furnishings are robust. They feel like they belong in Squamish. Benches and chairs have backs and arms, so that if you're a little bit older and you've got trouble getting up and down, you've got the things you need to get up off the bench. The placement of benches and chairs allows for wheelchair access to sit beside or across from was important to us. Again, I talked about the pathways being hard surfaced, but I think if we dig into the images that we're showing here, what we're really illustrating is that all the pathways are lined on either side with plant materials. So you're not walking beside the landscape, you're walking through it. And that was a really important component to our development of landscape scheme. Even the entry monument that announces this neighborhood is robust elements. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But the open space really encourages people to linger, to relax, to enjoy, and to be part of this community. So let's go to the next slide. That top row, again, begins to show how we wanted to treat things like play areas, using natural materials in a natural setting. Speaking of materials, using heavy timber and stone in the landscape, where we can, using stone to form steps and using stone to form the walls. The landscape is, the planting is layered, is colorful, is interesting. And then that last row, again, reinforcing the idea of the pocket neighborhood. The image, the bottom left image is the typical residential green, and really shows how the landscape connects not only with people moving around it on the path systems, but people who are living there as well. Let's go to the next slide. We'll dig a little bit into what our landscape expression wants to look like. The first place that we started was thinking about planting, and it became really apparent to us that we needed to create more than just one plant list. We've got 5 different plant lists: the streetscape, the common areas, and the residential areas. The plant list is comprised of native plants, but primarily non-native, non-invasive. And the reason we've kind of used a mixture of the two is we wanted to have a little bit more variety, a little bit more robust color. But at the same time, we also wanted to recognize that some of the natives don't do as well adjacent to hard surfaces and those sorts of things. The buffer areas and the rain garden swales, which actually make up most of the site, those are all native plants and some native trees and shrubs. So if we go to the next slide, we'll see a plan of how we kind of laid that out. So the image on the right is a plan that illustrates where those areas are. And I'm going to say that around the perimeter, the light sort of mossy color and the dark green, that's all native plant material. So all around the perimeter of the site is the native plant material. The idea that it sort of transitions into the natural forest that's adjacent or nearby was really important to us. The pocket neighborhood and the community green to the pocket neighborhood in the top right-hand corner and the community green to the west. That's where we're using a little bit more of the non-native introduced species that are non-invasive. Again, for reasons of aesthetic and that sort of fit within the character of that landscape. So next slide, please. So I just want to start with the pocket neighborhood, and of course it's up in the northeast corner. And if I start really on the edges, so the top right-hand corner of that top right-hand drawing, again, just to remind you, that's that 4 to 6 meter grade change. So just adjacent to that, just below that, is a long strip of parking. And the pocket neighborhood doesn't have individual parking spaces for each unit. It's a grouped parking. And so we're using the landscape. We're using that steep edge as a screen for the parking with the neighbors above. So if you're up above in that residential neighborhood above, you don't even see the cars because they're actually quite below you, tucked in on the edge of the screen. The top right-hand corner of the pocket neighborhood is where our mail kiosk is, and it's also where the entry monument is. That's kind of a meeting place for people to say hello to their neighbors as they pick up the mail. If you get into the middle space that's surrounded by the cottages, that's our residential green. And the images below begin to show you some of the character of that. But the top right-hand corner of the residential green, we've got a fire pit and some Adirondack chair seating. And then just below that in the bottom right-hand corner of the residential green is a quiet seating area. In the middle is a lawn area that's surrounded by planting that gives a little bit of a buffer to that loop path system. And then just on the left of the lawn area is a big outdoor kitchen and harvest table for gathering. It's connected to the lawn area, so you can actually have the whole neighborhood come and have a celebration, much like that's shown in the images below. And I think that's really what we're aspiring to, the idea that the landscape actually creates this place and this opportunity for this pocket neighborhood and for the people to really feel like they're part of something something different and something community-oriented. So let's go to the next slide. So the top section, we're going to go through a series of sections, is just illustrates what we're looking at in terms of how we enter the site of the sea foot or come in by car. There's an entry monument that's using that robust hand-hewn stone, stone from the site that announces Garibaldi Springs. But I think more importantly, it's set within a landscape that is of plants and trees and shrubs. It's very welcoming and allows for a strong pedestrian connection. The section down below begins to illustrate, on the right-hand side of the section is that upper entry road. There is some visitor parking off that. We've taken advantage of that layered planting of trees and shrubs to screen the parking from the residential green, which is just to the left of it. And you can begin to see how we've allowed the landscape to somewhat respectful to the existing grades. We're following the level of that plateau. We're creating that residential green. We're stepping where we need to, but we're creating this very interesting opportunity for people to gather. Let's go to the next slide, please. As we continue to cut sections through the residential green, where the top slide is the lower portion of the cottages, and I think what's really interesting here is what we can see is that there's a strong relationship on the right-hand side of the cottage to that pedestrian pathway, but it's set far enough back, and there's enough landscape buffer where you feel private, but you feel connected, and that was really what we were trying to achieve in this landscape design. The lower section really begins to show this whole idea of the pocket neighborhood, how it's connected to the adjacent rear terraces and private decks. The open space in the middle, that semi-public open space, this happens to be where the harvest table and outdoor kitchen are. How you really do feel like you're part of the community, and that's really what it's all about. So let's go to the next slide. The private open space is important to us, and Mark talked a little bit about the overlook and the no-go zone along the south edge. This section begins to illustrate that, and I think what we've done is we've got a couple of layers of landscape that help to respect the privacy of our downhill neighbors. We do have a low fence on the left-hand side of that section is a low fence, but that 2-meter wide rainwater swale that is heavily planted, the images down below begin to show that. It's not accessible to the residents. It's meant to keep everybody a minimum of 2 meters back from the edge. It does get larger as we get to the west end of the site. Not only creates a sense of a private yard for the new residents of Garibaldi Springs, but also, again, respects that overlook to the existing neighbors below. So let's go to the next slide, please. The next slide yet. There it is. We are in Squamish, and there is grade change, as Mark talked about the benches. The red line that you can see through here is the existing grade, so it was steep to begin with. We have pushed and pulled it a little bit because I think what we're really trying to do here with the top section, is to illustrate how we've created a rear yard that's livable. It's 7 meters wide, and then we're stepping the landscape with rock stack wall and planting in between each of the terraces. So we've created this sort of mountain atmosphere with a fairly large yard. The lower section begins to show a different condition, same kind of treatment, where a rock stack and combination of planting helps us to make that grade change from high to low. So let's go to the next slide, please. The last piece of the neighborhood is the community green to the west. It's at the end of the lower entry road, just at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. That's one way to connect to it. That's the accessible way. It's made up of 3 terraces. There's an upper meadow that's just adjacent to the turnaround. There's a mid-terrace where the play area is. There's a lower terrace, which is an outdoor meadow. And just to the right of, or to the north or east or the right of the lower terrace, you can see the pathway that connects the lower road up to the west or the top of the page. And right where we get to, I'm just going to say it's the sort of northwest corner of that. We do have a very significant amount of grade change. We're sort of sandwiched between 2 residential units, one to the north, one to the northeast, one to the south. And our pathway connection to Dowd Drive goes in a right-of-way between those units. So we've had to incorporate stairs in that area, but still, again, accessible access on the lower entry road. If we back up through the entry, through the walkway, there's quiet seating on either side of the walkway. The lower terrace or the lower green has a picnic area. It's connected to the play area by a short set of steps. The play area is connected to the pathway through a fully accessible connection. And as I said, the upper meadow, we're going to use that for snowplow in the wintertime, and it's just a nice grassy spot in the summertime. We'll go to the next slide, and I'll talk about the overlook area and the rainwater swale. Really good to see. So this is a section through the play area, and I think what we can see, if we start on the left-hand side of the section, we've got our 1.8 meter wide pathway, and we're actually showing also how we're lighting all the pathways throughout the neighborhood with pole lighting. There's the play area, and around the edges of the play area, there's lots of opportunity for mom and dad or caregiver to sit in the Adirondack chairs. But you can see how we're following, we've begun to follow the grade change on the right, but we've chosen to create an edge that really increases that setback from the no-go zone. That's all native and natural planting. Within the no-go zone is the rainwater swale, so we're collecting all the stormwater there. And we're creating a really significant buffer between ourselves and the downhill neighbors. The character of the play area and the character of the space is very much using natural materials, large boulders, and again, the idea of the meadow, great place to really book in the summertime. So next slide, please. That was it for the landscape, so thanks for your attention on that part.
You want any last comments, Kevin, before we go to questions?
No, I just, the only thing I just wanted to mention, I thought everything was really well covered. Just on the sustainability piece, the entire project is all electric, so we've taken natural gas. It's not even coming to the site, which was something that was important, I know, coming from council in Squamish, so I just wanted to mention that. But other than that, thank you.
Thanks very much. Well, we will proceed to questions here. And if David's ready, we'll start with you.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the presentation. It's obviously a fairly large project. Could you speak a little bit more about the palette of materials that you're using? It seems like a lot of hardy.
Yeah, so generally speaking, the main field colors on the, or materials, I guess, on the homes are a combination of hardy shake, hardy lap siding, using stone in some, in some key locations. For some of these lower roofs where they're visible, we're standing seam metal roofing, heavy timber at some of the entry locations, as I mentioned, and then also where we're using kind of exposed brackets and exposed rafter tails, those would be more as well.
Can I just add to that, Mark?
Yeah.
Just with respect to the hardy, there's large parts of the hardy they're not standard gosh, what's the right word? They're wood grain look hardy that's actually done by a company in Squamish for the natural wood looking hardy. And then for a number of the shake areas, it's a weathered hardy shake. So it's the first time I've seen this product. I've been working with hardy for years, but these are really nice variations on the standard hardy. So it's not a opaque solid core. It's got a lot of texture and depth to it. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. And then the stone, is that a cultured stone or is that a natural stone?
That's a cultured stone, but sort of selected to sort of make sure that it's the color and kind of the rock stack pattern is very much in keeping with kind of that more rugged terrain of Squamish.
Okay. And then could you maybe just expand a little bit on the differences in the townhouse blocks? You talked a lot about trying to differentiate them as you drive down that road.
Yeah, so the townhomes have various color schemes, and also we're using the articulation of the building face itself. So in terms of pop-out bays and kind of large windows, the roof lines themselves are quite varied to create that sort of texture and variation down the streetscape. And then we're not kind of doing large building blocks, we're sort of breaking them up. So as you move down from that street, which is on a curve as well, you have these pause points in between buildings where we can fit in landscaping or visitor parking, things like that.
Okay. The upper accessible cottages, do they have direct access down to that central park area from their own cottages?
From the upper cottage area, like some of those sections we're showing, the grade change is quite extreme. So the idea is, in terms of a sidewalk, you would have to go east to the north-south strata road, and then take the sidewalk down to the green. But just by virtue of the extreme grade change, there just wasn't a way to get that to happen. But they have the upper residential green as kind of a primary outdoor space as well.
Okay. There's a couple of I'm not a landscape architect, but there's a couple of landscape questions I just had out of interest, which was, in the upper parking area, was there any consideration given to actually having fingers of landscaping this to break up that arcane?
That's a good question, and I think the consideration was given, and we're just ran out of space in order to do that. So I think what we elected to, just because of grade and how the grades work, going east-west along that road, so the parking has all been grouped together. That slope, however, is terraced and planted. So where we couldn't go in between the cars, we are going behind the cars on the terrace slope.
Right, and that leads into my next question. We didn't see many details of that wall. How tall is that wall? What is steps back? Does it follow the new steps back guidelines for retaining walls? And what is it planted with?
It does. It follows the step back guidelines. It ranges in height from 4 to 6 meters as you move from east to west. And it is planted. That's one where we're taking advantage of native plant material. So we are planting the terraces that we've created. It ranges from 3 to 4 terraces. They're planted out in native plants.
Okay. Yep, that's really all the questions I had at the moment. Thanks.
Thanks, David. We will go to Mike next.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation, guys. Can everyone hear me? I'm trying some new headphones this time.
Yes.
Perfect. I've just got a couple questions. So the one is for I believe it's the duplexes. Yeah, the lower part of the development buildings there, the duplexes. Is there a connection from front to back to the backyard? Like between the buildings, is there a fence dividing between the two, or is there a set of stairs?
So each of those, sorry, did you want to take that one, Bruce? No. Okay. Yeah, on the duplex unit, so we're dealing with a story of grade change there. So the access to those yards, you know, would be through kind of the lower, you know, the lower walkout basement. But we would need to kind of get access in there from a strata point of view, just for, you know, just for maintenance purposes. So we'll probably have to go, you know, between yards to sort of make that happen. But the grade change, you know, just didn't allow for that kind of access down to the rear yard.
I can speak a little bit to how maintenance gets into that, now that I know where you're located. What we have done with many polygon projects where we've got a situation where you can't access it coming from either the front of the unit to the back or the back to the front, is that we get to a spot where you can access it, and then each yard has a gate, and we basically call it a maintenance gate, so that maintenance people can start at one yard and basically move from yard to yard to yard, and do the things that they need to do. We find it to be very practical in that it keeps the privacy that the residents, the people who are living there want, but also allows for that maintenance to easily get in and look after those yards.
So as you go down, so Dowwood kind of heads downhill from east to west, and you've got the townhouse development kind of going as far west as you go. Those townhouses affect the views of those existing homes at all? Like as the grade comes down Dowwood and those homes get lower closer to this development, is there much sort of view obstruction between the two?
Maybe I'll take that.
Oh, sure, Kevin.
Sure.
I'll let you carry the upper edge, so those residential homes to the northern, like along the northern edge, that grade change is anywhere from 4 to 6 meters. So they're well up, you know, well up on the slope. So we should be well clear of that.
And then, I think my last question. The sidewalks of the duplexes at the very bottom. So to be able to connect over to the park, communal sort of green space in the far northwest corner, people from the cottages are going to go over to the connection, sort of strata road on the far east side, come down in front of the duplexes. Is the sidewalk on the south side of that, like in front of those duplexes, or is it on the townhouse side?
It's on the duplex side.
Right. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. We'll go to Sarah next.
Okay, buckle up. I've got lots of questions. So first, I wanted to verify that there's an 8-inch step at the front entrance to buildings 1 through 4, which have the adaptable units in. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And then in buildings 5 through 12, Unit C, there is an 18-inch difference from the finished grade?
That's correct. Up to their kind of, their front porch. It will vary slightly depending on kind of the detailed grading, but generally speaking.
So has there been any consideration of how these units will be accessed if they're being pre-purchased by wheelchair users?
I'll
take
that.
Do you want to take that one, Kevin?
Yeah, so Sarah, Polygon policy on that is, and this for years and on all our communities, if someone demonstrates the need to make it fully accessible, then we do that at our cost. So, you know, in those instances that you're mentioning, we would have to obviously ramp to the front door and figure out these transitions, but we would be doing that at our cost. So that hence the adaptable.
Yeah, it's only in that the C-type units have such a big grade change. I'm just wondering space-wise how you're going to fit that in and it not interfere with the rest of your pathways that you've got going, and whether or not there's any opportunity for grading to, you know, bring a little bit more to reduce it even to 2 steps, and then if that does happen at pre-purchase, it might be less of a...
You know, to be honest, you're talking from the front stoop to the path, there's an 18-inch transition?
Yeah, it says that there's 3 steps up, 18 inches.
Okay, we can definitely look at that. I would, you know what, I'm going to be honest, I wasn't aware of that. I thought we were doing a one or two step, but we can certainly look at that.
Yeah, just, I mean, because it's sort of going downhill, that might be just bringing a bit more fill, I don't know. And then, is there a threshold at the main entrances into the adaptable unit?
Me again, I guess. Yeah, as the standard unit, yeah, the standard unit would have a threshold, but in the instance of someone, again, demonstrating that need, we would work with them to figure out the best way to make that work.
Okay.
And we've done this in other projects as well.
Okay, and you know what the size of the porch area is at the front entrance of those A-type units?
Back to you, Mark.
Yeah, so on the, so the A-type units, you're looking at about a 5 by 5 area clear. It kind of, and then the porch actually kind of wraps around a corner bump out of the unit, but kind of the open area is about 5 feet by 5 feet. I was also just speaking to someone in the office here, and he informed me that the grading at the entrances to all of the cottages was reduced during our last round, so there is only 1 step from the pathway up to the front stoop, so that has been addressed.
Okay. But it would still, as somebody with a wheelchair, yes, it will need to have no steps. And
yeah, that's correct. So I think that's where Kevin's comment.
Will the windows in the adaptable units be operable? Like, will they be openable and closable?
Yeah, they will. So, so just in terms of sensitivity, in terms of where that operable window is that the question? Making sure that
yeah, it's whether or not they're going to be accessible. Well, there's 2. Is whether or not the mechanism itself is going to be accessible to lock and close those windows, and then also what the height of those windows is. You know, what the bottom height of the windows are relative to the finished floor height.
Oh, right. Okay.
In the Unit A's, the faucets for the bathtub shower, are they meant to be on the toilet side of the wall?
This is the A unit here. They're currently drawn that way where we have the plumbing fur out, but I guess there's a possibility of flipping that to kind of increase accessibility to that fixture.
And then in Unit C, is there a proposed bench in the shower in the ensuite of the master suite?
That hasn't been detailed out fully. That's kind of haven't got to the interior design of that one yet. That is a deeper bathroom because of the clearance in front of the toilet and sink. So there is a zone there that would either need to be built out with a with a ledge or a bench of some sort. I'm not entirely sure what that's looking like at this point.
Okay. In the Unit D1 and 2, it shows that there's a single step down to the living area from the tree level. Is that a structural reason or just to have more ceiling height in that living area? Yeah,
to give us a sense of during the arrival that kind of added height in the front entry and foyer, just to create that, create a bit of spatial difference.
Are both the accessible parking stalls designated as visitor parking? There's two accessible parking stalls in the upper level, and it seems to me that they're both visitor parking. And
yeah, I'm not sure we've gone in so far as assigning those individual stalls, but I believe one is assigned to the cottage and one is assigned to the visitor. So we kind of have a blend of both. So they're split 1 and 1.
okay. And then am I to assume that the spaces that are between the blocks of the 4 parking spaces, is that paved surface? Is that whole parking lot paved? The upper parking lot?
Yes, the upper parking lot is all paved.
Okay. Do you know by chance what the kind of dimensions are of that unused space?
Mark, I don't know if you have easy access to that.
Do you have that dimension?
That information? I do not.
I can't say I do at this point.
Okay. And what's the proposed
we
size of the pavers that you're...
Oh, actually...
Right.
Sorry, before you get that one, Bruce, I was just informed that space that someone was measuring it here for me. It's 5 feet in between.
Okay, cool. Thank you. What's the proposed size of the pavers and the pedestrian pathways? Are they like a brick size, or are they larger, smaller?
So we've got a couple of different, in the residential green in the pocket neighborhood, that is pavers. Those are sort of a standard paver size, so the 4 by 8 paver. And then as you get out into the pathway system, it's not pavers, it's asphalt path. And that's as you leave the pocket neighborhood and get out towards the community green and that public path. We changed the treatment.
And is it flagstone that's kind of around the swell, kind of in the middle of the residential green?
Yeah, in the residential green, it is actually a man-made precast material that surprisingly looks exactly like flagstone, but it doesn't have the big wide gaps that you get in a normal flagstone path. So that's what we're using in that area. We've not used the material before, but we searched for it and found it locally for this project, and we're quite excited to give it a try.
Cool. I like less gaps is better.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and what's the proposed material between the Unit C buildings? Is that gravel?
So it's a combination of materials for all the buildings, in between the buildings. And the planting extends from the either facade up into the gap between the buildings, usually a couple of meters, and then it's large crushed stone on the slopes behind the planting. No one walks in there anyway, so we choose to make that easily maintained material that's flanked on both ends by planting.
And then is there any consideration, like if somebody needs to access the bicycle storage and they're a wheelchair user to get around there, is there some sort of like compacting or something that can be done to first surface?
There's a pathway there's a pathway to the storage, to the little storage area, and depending on where we are unit-wise and what the grades are unit-wise, it's either readily accessible by wheelchair or not, and it's simply just because of the benched nature of the site. So you have to kind of go unit by unit.
Okay. And then this is an architectural question. The height of the garages in Unit D, it looks like they're 9 foot 3/4, less the room required for the garage door track. In the B type units, it seems to be 7 foot 11 7/8, less the track. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe so, and I think that has to do with the actual kind of grade change that we're trying to kind of climb the slope up and kind of making the garage doors, you know, proportionately correct kind of within the elevation.
Right. What, has there been any consideration of what happens if somebody gets into the townhouse units that have the lower garage and they have an overheight vehicle? How will they find parking?
Well, I guess your standard garage door height is typically 7 feet. So I think that's kind of tends to be kind of the baseline height for for garage doors that kind of fit most vehicles. Now, if you've got an overheight vehicle or a bike rack or something of that nature on top, then that may not go in the 7 foot garage doors, but 7 feet seems to be, generally the standard for garage door openings. So
Okay.
there's a mix.
Sorry, I just want to jump in on this one. Our garages are over height by a foot from a typical garage that we would do anywhere else. And we did that more, honestly, to do with Squamish and roof racks and, boarding equipment and everything else. So I just want to ask Mark, we've got an overheight garage, but we've got a standard garage door, or do we have a higher garage door as well? Because we do have the higher ceiling. We could have a slightly bigger garage door. I thought we did. Are you looking to see if Ryan's answering it? Anyways, I believe we do have both a bigger ceiling and a bigger door.
Yes, the garage door, sorry, Kevin. Yeah, so sorry, the garage door is 8 feet, the ceiling's 9 feet.
Okay, thank you.
So you are going over and above the typical.
Regular. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sorry, my correction.
All my questions.
Thanks, Sarah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Carlos next for questions. If Carlos is with us.
I am, yeah. Sorry about that.
Okay, no problem.
Come back to the service here. Okay. Thank you so much for your presentation. I guess just for staff on this one, I think it'd be really great. I know we're doing this digitally, and it's difficult to have a material board, but it'd be great to have a material board with just some photos of the different treatments being proposed. Just because, and I had to pull up kind of, I'm guessing it's Fisher coating that you're using for the true grain kind of hardy solutions, and so that, when pulling that up online was quite helpful in getting an idea, because I think the renderings maybe don't make it look the same as your target is on that one, so I'll just hang that one out there. So my questions were, can you confirm, you have a detail on a lot of these buildings where your house numbers are located. Is that a hardy panel that you're proposing in that location on the ground floor?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. For the cottages and the affordable requirement, is that something that was achieved through, like, as a CAC? Are they coming in at a reduced cost, or are they just affordable due to the fact that they're kind of a single story?
I'll speak to that one. They're going to be rent restricted, so they have to be rental, and they are going to be set at some formula that hasn't quite been finalized, but some percentage of the MAC average rent, or something along that line. And then they'll be, in the inventory that's not managed by Squamish, but they'll be aware of those units and be part of the affordable housing stock in Squamish. So they're restricted.
So, and will you be set, like, so I noticed that, are those only the ones that do not include the secondary suite, or are those the units that include the secondary suite?
So in all of Squamish, or sorry, not Squamish, in all of this Garibaldi, we have to provide, Susan might correct me here, but I think it's 10% of the units. To answer your question, in this case, you know, we chose this form, and both the units in those homes are, both the primary unit and the secondary suite are affordable rent restricted. And there's 8 of them.
Okay, great. On the C, like the C unit, on the side fronting the street, you've chosen to have 2 versions of the hardy plank. And then at the rear of the building, you've kind of integrated some hardy plank and shingle. Was there a reason why you settled on that treatment for the sides fronting the street?
Yeah, so I think you know, at the front entries we have, you know, the front entry porch and sort of the detailing that goes along with that. And you know, I think it also had to do with where kind of material transitions made sense. You know, not transitioning materials on kind of an outside corner. So the way the plan bumps in and out, it made sense to sort of have that shingle on the community green, really have kind of emphasis and focus on that area. And then there was enough sort of happening on the front elevation with the you know, with the front entry stoop and canopy that it didn't really need it. So I think given that shingle to the backside where we were kind of really emphasizing this pocket park and pocket neighborhood was important.
Okay. And on those same units, on the rendering, there appears to be kind of a one-story connection in between the blocks of townhomes. Is that, and I couldn't work out from the architectural plans, is that your electrical room or is that your garbage storage or both?
The one-story.
Yeah, so basically.
On the side of the unit?
Yeah, exactly. And they almost connect the townhome blocks to each other.
Okay, you might be looking at the
electrical.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the shared community space in the cottage portion, is there going to be some form of controlled access for that? So it'll be restricted to residents of the community only, or?
I'll take that one.
Yeah, certainly. Okay.
Yeah. You're talking about the Western Community Green? Or
correct. No, sorry, no, the Eastern, where the cottage cluster backs onto. I guess you have a harvest table and a few other amenities there that could present a challenge if it was open to the public.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just speaking, the reason why I took this one, I'm just speaking to what we discussed with the community through the rezoning. It was always intended that the Western Community Green was more of a public park. There was never any discussion that this area was generally open to the public. So I think the answer to that would be the residents will probably, you know, control that, and it likely won't be.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's good. That's all I've got as far as questions go.
Okay, thanks, Carlos. Next up, Christina.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. Very thorough, and it's a great project. I just have a couple of questions. I didn't see anything or hear any mention about any community gardening or anything like that. I'm just wondering if there was any thought to opportunities for either a community garden within or opportunities for little private kitchen gardens.
So everybody has a backyard, so you could certainly put a small garden plot in your backyard. But the bigger overall community of Garibaldi Springs, there is a public park that's opposite the hotel. and there is a very large community garden area planned for that. So I think our hope was that you could become part of the bigger overall community and use those and put your name into that.
Great, okay.
Just add one comment to that. I'm just going to add one comment. Is the Bear Smart component. So community gardens are a bit challenged, and that's why, you know, in addition to what Bruce said, we thought we could better guard against the bears in one location and do a proper perimeter fencing, whereas if we do smaller ones, it would be much harder to do that.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, thanks. The other question I had, so you're using rain chains for a lot of the drainage from the roof, and I'm just curious if the rain chains are draining into like a rain garden, or what are they draining into?
Yeah, so the idea there, and I believe I'll have to check with engineering on this one, whether there's a requirement to actually have those connected into the stormwater. Certainly the preference is to sort of get them more naturally into the landscape in a controlled way. The idea is that there as well, they're draining kind of small roof areas. So, you know, the idea is they wouldn't be handling any kind of large volumes of water. But, yeah, that's something I need to sort of flush out more with engineering.
That's good. That's great for me. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks very much, Christina. Last but not least is Graham.
Yeah, hi, thanks for the presentation. My questions about grading affordability have already been asked, so I'll just ask one remaining, just about public realm and connectivity. So as I see it, there's only one sidewalk or pathway along Road B, I guess it is, along the duplexes. So I was just wondering if you could confirm that there is only one sidewalk, and then just talk about the decision making there and the rationale for that.
There is just the one sidewalk. We looked at how we could connect the Pocket neighborhood to the rest of the community, and I think really where we got to was grade change, and the existing grades that are there didn't allow that to happen. So we're using that, everyone in the Pocket neighborhood moves to the east, comes out to the 2.5 meter wide sidewalk that's adjacent to the entry road, and then makes their way down to the lower Road B and moves through the neighborhood that way. I think the other rationale for that is that 2.5 meter wide pathway continues south in the future, and it's what will connect you to the rest of the new emerging neighborhood and the public park and all the trails as you continue moving south. So our sort of thought is that it is really part of this phase and ought to be really considered as part of a really integrated movement system for pedestrians.
Okay, so understanding kind of those broader movements, but specific to Road B, was there consideration of having a pathway on both sides? Am I clear you're saying it's kind of a function of those depths of the townhouses? Did you consider putting it on both sides, or specifically why is it just on the west side along the duplexes?
It doesn't. It doesn't serve a lot of residents. I think we thought that that we could easily move people back and forth through the neighborhood in a friendly way and in a comfortable way with the sidewalk on just one side of the street. It just adds more space that we can use for soft landscape. So, you know, I think our decision was that because we've just got a limited number of residents and we're only moving, we're making that connection, a sidewalk on the south side made sense to us.
Okay.
Can I speak to that one a second? Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a bit passionate about this sidewalk question, but I'll limit my comments. I've done a lot of townhomes over many years. There's two trade-offs when you have sidewalks at all on the lane. One of them is it makes it virtually impossible to get any meaningful landscape into that run. And the other is that just the nature of zoning and density, you have to take away from something, and you end up usually taking away from the rear yards. So, you know, in that way, you know, just the livability down the road with that as well for us.
Okay, I only caught half of that there, is breaking up, but
Yep.
thanks. That addresses my question.
Is that all your
Thanks,
questions,
John.
Brad?
That's all for me. That's all for me,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Okay, well, I only have a couple of short ones here. It looks to me as though there's sort of one design along the duplex row, or the bottom row, the D, design D. Through this, I'm not sure how many in a row there are, but there, you know, you're doing color variation, but is it basically one design and maybe some are mirrored, but there's no other variance in design?
Yeah, so what we've done in in kind of the massing of the duplex units is certainly created each unit with its own identity. Each one has its own shed roof. We do vary kind of, you know, the direction of those and the color scheme, and then try to create variation through, you know, some of the end units or kind of areas where they're kind of more high visible, introducing stone onto the garage, or introducing those accent garage doors, which are more kind of, you know, aluminum and frosted glass. So we're kind of using elements to kind of create that variation along the streetscape. They're also just duplexes, so it's not kind of a linear kind of row home typology where you kind of need to create a whole lot of variation to get the essentially the effect of a varied streetscape. So we're kind of using those tools to kind of create that variation.
Okay, so it's not no structural changes, but cosmetic changes throughout.
Yeah, that's right. And I think there are variations in the floor plan, as I briefly noted, mainly on the upper level. The master bedroom flips from one side to the other. Yeah, structurally, they're more or less the same.
Thanks. The other question is just around, I know that the top of Dowd there it gets quite steep, and then you're coming down the backside into your first parking area there. What's the slope to get from the top of the street at the corner down to your first parking level? It would seem, it looks steep.
Yeah, no, we're dealing definitely with a hillside condition here, and the civil engineer has kind of worked hard at that, and I think we're pretty much maxed out at that. I believe it's a 12% road slope. Yeah.
Okay. All my other questions were asked, so that's great. Thanks very much. We will next go to comments. Unless anyone has any other remaining questions in the group. David?
Yeah, I had one last question. I was stuck a little bit there, but is there any covered outdoor public space?
The area where the harvest table and barbecue, that would be the one spot where we are looking at covering over the barbecue area. But other than that, there is not. And I think our rationale for that, we've talked about that and gone back and forth amongst the team. And I think our rationale for that is just that it's a real tight little neighborhood, a real tight community where you're literally just steps away from your house, from your unit. And the idea that, you know, if it started to rain, I think reality is you would sort of go to your veranda, you'd go to your porch. And I think we're just sort of looking at it from that standpoint, that's really why we've done it. So we think there's rationale for adding some solid cover over the barbecue.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. That's all.
Okay, thank you. We'll stay with you, David, as the first person making comments.
Okay, sorry. Did Mike have a question?
Yeah. Yeah, I did actually.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. I don't mean to keep harping on the sidewalk. I know Graham brought it up, and then I brought it up. So I'm looking at plan from the landscaping plan L1.01. And I know that we've cleared up which side of the street the sidewalk is on, but it looks to me like there's trees in the middle of the sidewalk and there's a green space kind of dividing between each duplex. Is that the sidewalk there? Like, is it continuous, or does it have sort of landscaping between them? And then how does it connect to the sidewalk that's going to be running down Road A?
So we may not be illustrating the sidewalk 100% correct, but it is a continuous sidewalk that runs along the south side of the laneway, and it basically connects into the neighborhood green, the pathway, and then connects out to the north-south entry drive.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. We'll go back to you, David.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think it's a great presentation. Obviously, a lot of information there. Overall, I think it's great to see a site working with the slopes of the land and benches. So that's really positive. A couple of areas that I might have some further comments on would be, you know, an overlooked area for beautification is that sort of large parking area to the top side. I really think I would urge the applicant to sort of look at maybe breaking that up, adding more landscaping, and really detailing out that retaining wall planting. We've had some issues in Squamish with retaining walls that don't quite match up to kind of the images that are shown. And I just feel it's, you know, for those adaptable units to look out onto a large car park and a large retaining wall, there's a little bit of, you know, they've got the raw end of the deal there. For the building materials, in an ideal world, I really wish that there were some more natural materials spread around the building. It is a lot of facade. It's good to see stone, but I hope there would be some wise choices with the hardy panel, and I assume it is the Fisher product that you're using, and there certainly are some convincing colors in there, but there's also some very tacky looking colors. And at the end of the day, when you use all sort of faux materials, they need to be sort of used correctly, otherwise the whole development has a kind of faux material look. So I would just urge the applicant to kind of consider that. And keeping on the material palette, I think for such a large development, it is quite a narrow material palette, and I think that that's kind of giving the false sense that it is quite a homogeneous development. I appreciate trying to break up the buildings, but I feel that because the materials are so similar, it's causing the kind of the roofs and everything else to take the brunt of that ability to sort of mix it up a bit. And I personally feel that the townhouses are very quite busy, should I say, with all these different roof types, different roof angles, different, you know, materials. I would have loved to see maybe the townhouses in a completely different palette that did relate, but, you know, could be quite easily separated from the rest of the buildings. But I think overall it's excellent to see the variety in the uses, especially of the unit types, as well as the sort of West Coast modern architecture, which is great. And additionally, really amazing to see such like intertwined landscaping, and really promising to see open spaces actually integrated into the design and not just afterthought. Also very happy to see sort of step code 3 EV charges, etc., which will sort of provide value to the owners going forward. So overall, I think it's a great use of the site. And I just had one final comment for maybe staff. This is a huge application, and the PDF that we received was 158 pages of, in my mind, is closer to a building permit set. So it's really helpful to see the presentation. The presentation is much more easier to follow and to review. And I echo Carlos's comments. It'd be great to see a material board, especially when there's 60 different units. It's kind of hard to, especially in the detail that's there. It was quite hard to navigate. But yeah, thank you for your presentation.
Okay, thanks, David. Mike, would you like to make comments next?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks for the presentation, guys. Just because it's fresh in mind, I'd say the same thing that David said. I just had a really hard time navigating the large PDF. I'm not so sure that I was on your end of the staff, but same thing there. I didn't actually know that this piece of land existed, and I've done a lot of work up in that area, so it's kind of impressive to see 60 units being put in something I didn't know was actually even there before this. Judging by the way that it's all sloped, I think you guys have done a great job of like stepping everything. It's nice to see all the stone walls rather than sort of concrete retaining walls. Someone brought up right at the very end whether or not there was any sort of covered outside areas, and I kind of agree. Like, I think everything's kind of close and it's easy to get back home, but you know, in Squamish we kind of have weather systems. Sometimes the rain sticks around for 40 days at a time, but sometimes it does blow in and out kind of every 30 minutes. And if the rain comes in, it would be nice to be able to kind of shelter if you're sitting in the park for 10, 15 minutes, so you don't need to kind of go back and hang out in your veranda and then come back out to the outside areas. So maybe a couple covered sort of pergolas or something where people can kind of still enjoy those outdoor spaces when the rain's coming and going. But aside from that, I think it looks great.
Thanks, Mike. Dara is next.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. It's fantastic to see where it's kind of come, and I'm encouraged that those who are purchasing units can have them made more accessible. Having said that, that there are 4 buildings that will be all rental. At least one of them should be made to be accessible. And so I've got my list of comments here. All of the operating controls should be operable with a closed fist, and they shouldn't exceed 1,200 millimeters above finished floor. So that's all of your controls for thermostats, windows openings, locks, etc. Your faucets need to be lever handled. They should have temperature controls to not exceed 49 degrees Celsius. All of the adaptable units should have a shower and a bench with a trench drain. The faucets should be located on the center of the back wall, so that you're not having to reach over the toilet to turn on your shower. The shower head should be adjustable to be between 1,200 millimeters and 20-30 millimeters above finished floor. You could consider in the unit that's going to be made accessible to have the adaptable bathroom actually be off of the ensuite with a pocket door for privacy reasons, getting in and out of the shower. The adaptable or the accessible unit should have an all-in-one laundry unit, one that washes and dries so that you can reach it. A stackable unit will not work for somebody in a wheelchair. The sliding glass door should either have a very low threshold or be replaced by French doors to eliminate the threshold. All of the adaptable bathrooms should have the doors swinging outwards. All of the adaptable bathrooms, so all of the Type A and Type C units, should have backing in the walls behind the toilet for a grab bar and around the 3 walls within the shower for future grab bars. The accessible unit, of course, should have grab bars added to it when being built. Your accessible unit should have appliances that are carefully selected, that have controls that are reachable from a seated position so that you don't have to reach over hot elements or turn on your exhaust fan, whatever, that is reachable from the front. A pull-out work surface should be added to all of the unit A1s that goes between the stove and the refrigerator. That should be between the fridge and the stove, and it should have a knee clearance of 685 millimeters above the floor. I would consider removing the step down into the living room area of the D unit so that those could be visitable, that they would be able to have visitors over to have dinner if they were using a wheelchair, and in which case, if you had a pocket door into the powder room, that too would be able to be used. There does need to be some consideration about accessible parking for residents who need that parking. You may find that, despite David's comments of the adding more plantings to the parking lot, that you may need to use one or two of those additional 5-foot spaces to accommodate an additional wheelchair parking space. Also, as my vehicle is over height, I still wouldn't be able to fit into your overheight garages, so there might need to be some consideration or swapping of some parking somehow for overheight vehicles. And also, all of the pathways should be 1,600 millimeters wide, not 1,500. The new CSA guidelines are 1,600. It's only 10 cm more, but that will help for passing on the pathway. And then finally, I just encourage you with the harvest table to have legs on the harvest table as opposed to a center stand beneath the table. It just allows easier access under the table for wheelchair users. And if the benches are the full length of the table, then just have the ends of the table extend slightly so the wheelchairs can go under them. And otherwise, I like the project. I think you've done a good job with very constrained space. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Sarah. We go now to Carlos.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks so much for this presentation and the project. I think it goes a long way to showing that there was a lot of consideration for the neighboring properties. And I'm really quite pleased to see a different housing type being brought into Squamish, and I think it's great that you tie some of the affordable units to those units in particular, because I could see them, I see them as being required in the community. So thank you for that. I do really like the way that this styling comes together for the cottages, and I think you've done a great job in the materiality and the various features of that concept. I definitely agree that public, the shared area with the harvest table and the barbecue should be controlled by the people in that community. So I think it's important that remains, a semi-private space with just those residents. When I watched the public consultation video, which was put online, and kind of a series of these presentations, which are great, by the way, I did get excited at a couple of your precedent images, including the kind of Scandinavian cottage with the natural wood materials, and on the top right corner you have some really quite nice refined horizontal siding, and I really got excited about that. And then as we moved through the presentation, I got a little concerned when I saw the exterior on the roadside for the B unit and just the amount of the horizontal plank siding. And while I appreciate the materials that you've selected do look a lot richer than the materials in the rendering, I have some concerns about what that's going to look like when it's actually built. And so I would encourage you, as David mentioned, to explore some variation in those materials and some additional options for that building specifically. I think the other building, strike a nice balance, but the B units in particular, I think could use some further refinement. But other than that, I think great job. And I'll echo David's comments. The landscape plan is fantastic and will create a really great environment for the people living here and for the people living around this community as well. And excited to see the next phases of this come forward. So thanks.
Thanks, Carlos. Christina.
Great. Yes, thanks again for a really thorough presentation. And I do echo that the PDF was really large and a bit hard to navigate, but the presentation was great. It really helped clear things up. And I do echo a lot of the comments of my colleagues. I just wanted to say also that I really appreciate how the natural realm is integrated into this project. I think it's done very effectively. And I love the lined paths, the idea that you're walking through the landscape. I think that's really nice. And also the idea of using the natural native plants on the outside. It's a nice sort of subtle entrance and connection to the surrounding areas. And then keeping the more sort of punchy landscape palettes for areas closer to the buildings. I think that's really effective. I also appreciate all of the natural stormwater management. It's nice to see all the attempts at the rain gardens and daylighting all of the stormwater. And the commons area is a great idea, and having the verandas facing each other and having those verandas covered, it's almost like having an extra room, which is really great. And that's good for me. Yeah, that's a really great project. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Christina. And last but not least, Graham.
Yeah, thanks. I'll echo the comments previously given. Thanks for such a detailed level of detail in this project, which is very big. It's great to see it come forward. Really appreciate the diversity of housing being offered in this neighborhood, particularly for rental. It's great to hear that'll be secured, and hope a decent level of affordability can be secured in the future with your work with the district. The landscape plan is very detailed. It's a challenging site with the grading, something I think, in my personal opinion, hasn't been handled well in the past. So it's great to see you've done a good job of it, particularly with the terracing through the site, and then also the integration of swales and stormwater into those features, and then the community spaces provided in this neighborhood, which is great and needed for communities like this, despite all the forests that we're surrounded by. The architecture, I really like the West Coast modern expression that you've chosen. I think it's appropriate. Like the use of stone and other materials. I would agree with some of the previous comments just about the extent of the hardy and the limited palette, particularly in the townhouses, where you do have a large amount of facade, and would agree with some of the previous comments just about maybe breaking those up a little bit. The cottages, the duplexes, I think work. There's enough going on there, but maybe breaking up some of the townhouse facade with other colors, other fourth color, or some other material, I think would serve that group well. Otherwise, I think it's a great project and really well done. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Graham. I'll be short. I echo everyone's comments so far, particularly David, where it comes to materials, I should say. The only one I would really want to pick on is those duplexes, and I'm just having trouble wrapping my head around 17 in a row with exactly the same roof line. Even if the cosmetic side is varied, it's quite a repetitive sort of stance I'm feeling, and it would be nice just to see some kind of better attempt there on that side. But some of the other designs and the other units I really quite like. So that's it for me on this. Thanks very much. Wonderful presentation. Nicely done project. I will go next to the recommendation. And I usually read out the four potential recommendations, and then we'll pick one. So recommendation A is that the advisory design panel supports the project as presented and does not need to see this project returned for further review. Recommendation B is that the advisory design panel supports the project as presented and would like the applicant to work with staff to resolve the following recommendations. D is that the advisory design panel supports the project as presented and would like the applicant to resolve the following recommendations and return to present a revised project. And D is that the advisory design panel does not support the project as presented for following reasons. Discussion on which recommendation? Sarah?
I would like to make option B, please.
Any
I would say B.
discussion on that? Support? Okay, so Sarah will move and second for option B. David? And we'll call the vote. Anyone against? No hands, so option B it is. And do we want to go through any specific recommendations, or shall we rely on our notes as we have done before in the last electronic meeting? Yeah, go ahead, David.
Oh, sorry. I think the notes are fairly good, and there was a couple of issues that were repeated. So, yeah.
I usually suggest if there's anything in particular that stands out above anything else, we just might note it, but otherwise I think our recommendations were pretty clean. Okay, very good. Well, thank you very much to the proponent and everyone. Great presentation. And I would suggest perhaps we take 5 minutes before the next
Thanks, everyone.
project. Advisory Design Panel, and the item 2 of business is Development Permit 505-39319 Queensway. And we will hand off to our planner, Robin. Not Robin.
Not Robin, Jesse.
Hi, Jesse.
Hi, good afternoon.
You're a little bit
blurry.
Okay, we can hear you, but the video's a little funny. Okay, there we go.
What you gonna do? So good afternoon, Advisory Design Panel. My name is Jessie Fletcher, planner with the District of Squamish. Here to introduce an application for a development permit for one industrial building located at the north end of the Sea to Sky Business Park. The proposed building will have a gross floor area of 1,785 square meters. The development is located in the I-11 zone, which permits light industrial uses such as automobile-oriented commercial, heavy equipment sales, motor vehicle repair, warehouse, and alcohol beverage manufacturing. The proposed development is located in Development Permit Area 3, and this is the first time it's been presented to Advisory Design Panel. 2 quick things to note. The first is that the site is significantly constrained by utility corridors and their statutory right-of-ways. So there's a water line, a storm line, and a gas corridor running through the site, so it's very constrained. And then the second is that in order to accommodate those stat right-of-ways, the applicant is seeking 2 variances, both to the design of the parking lot. One is to vary the zoning bylaw so that no parking islands are required, and to vary the requirement for a 2-meter landscape buffer along the property lines. So staff are seeking ADP's expertise and recommendations on building form, character, and materials, and landscaping as it pertains to Development Permit Area 3. I will share the screen now and hand it over to the applicants. And just a reminder to the applicants, if they can cue me to change the slide, that would be great. And just bear with me here. Edge. Okay. Over to the applicant.
Thank you, Jesse. I'm going to hand this over to Sharzad. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Welcome to Seven Skies presentation. Thank you for joining us today. On behalf of Azados International, I am pleased to present this project in support of the current development permit resubmission for Seven Skies. My name is Sharzad Khatami, and I am the lead designer and the owner of this project, and an intern architect at Rafi Architects in downtown Vancouver, focused on residential high-rises in partnership with Azurian principal architect Colin Cox and our landscape designer Travis Warren. In this project, we are present to introduce and walk you through the proposed design. The goal of this partnership is to create a unique design which is envisioned to benefit the Squamish community. So in this presentation, I'll cover a brief introduction to the site characteristics, then about the big box typology, Next, I'll walk you through proposed architectural design with details, and finally hand a presentation to Travis expanding on landscape consideration. Actually, do you have the slide before this one? It's the overall view of the site. I just wanted to, hello, Jesse.
This slide? Are we on the right slide?
No, the one before this, overall view of the slide number 4. About 7 and 5.
This is slide number 4. Is this correct?
No, this is number 5 in my.
This one is number 5 in mine.
Okay, so go to the slide before that, which is number 4. So do you have it, or?
I have this is slide 4 in my slide deck.
Yeah, I actually can see the overall image of the as a panoramic one. So anyway, I just wanted to explain a little bit. I can explain it through this one. Here is an overall view of the site and its characteristics, actually located on the north end of the C2 Sky Business Park. Densely trees park to the west side provides a natural buffer from the railway behind. A vacant land on the north in the same zoning to be built in the near future probably. And a 2-story earlier built warehouse on the south. And just leaves the Queensway and only access to the site. So the proposal is for a single row of 8 light industrial units with a gross floor area numbered by 13,800 square feet. And the proposed building offers units with varied sizes and design. And mezzanines are also considered and can be adapted to the needs of the buyers for purposes allowed by zoning. So this is an panoramic street view from the site, which now actually we have the front vegetation cleared off. And next slide, please. And next slide. Hello?
We're on slide number 6 now? I think she's watching the stream.
Oh,
are you watching the stream or what's on the blue jean?
I am on the blue jean. So I don't know if anyone else can.
It hasn't changed for us.
It hasn't changed, yeah.
It has or hasn't?
Has not.
Okay. Interesting. You're sharing, okay. I'm going to try sharing again. Oh, did I just accidentally edge? And can you guys?
No.
Okay. Are we on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. So the Squamish of old is very quickly getting swallowed up by the new. Yet at the same time, this resurgence brings along with it much opportunity and many new businesses and development. So the community has grown, and the new face of the Squamish is sculpted with design appreciation in the past few decades in comparison with other cities and districts in Greater Vancouver. Also, this international objective is to support the district of the Squamish plans by attracting business models in this creative context, and proposes a great encouragement to local demand with a much more lucrative market. So in this slide, you also notice there is a specific definition for a light industrial building which shapes its building typology. focusing on maximizing the profit for builders and business owners, very much minimizes unnecessary design appreciation, and leaves visual experiences minimal in its urban context. The next slide, please. Okay. In our design, at the same time as respecting the general characteristics of a big box, I try to add some dimensions that offer a more experimental facade compared to the conventional flat surface. For that, I started studying the characteristics that make Squamish unique. In this image, you see unique flip sides in Squamish, where a mirror shape of number 7 extracted from, and that beautifully follows nature's algorithmic rules. And similarly, observed and applied in First Nations icons and art. So next slide, please. This diagram displays the idea formation from the big box. The first top image on the left offers the basic mass, which later divides into smaller segments, and soon adopts abstracted mountain edges that are excluded from the box, and gradually shaped and embraced within its new context. So next slide, please. As an additional design inspiration, it is interesting and proper to reflect to that a sky in the project title is driven from the in-situ sky highway, and number 7 is borrowed from diverse sources respecting culture diversity in Canada, in addition to organic outline of the figure 7 extracted from nature of the Squamish, and also in the orthography of the original name of the Squamish that you can see in the logo. Although a symbol and conventionally represents the brutal stuff. And number 7 is internationally a magical number as well, to just bullet points, 7 days, 7 musical notes, 7 directions, creation of word in 7 days from Bible, 7 cities of love by Atar, Persian philosopher and poet, which is my background from. And 7 sacred teachings from First Nations culture, teaching human conduct toward others. And I included links that you can find out and study further. Just please, next slide. Okay, the architectural design is contemporary and simple, yet multi-layered in employing today's demand. Overall design follows the form and character of nearby buildings, while at the same time fosters distinctive, creative character and architectural excellence by reflecting and celebrating unique characters of Squamish, where organic inspiration from nature and local material are being reintroduced. Although thinking out of the box increases the cost considerably, with background in art and architecture, we aim to enrich visual characteristics of a light industrial construction, provide enhanced and contemporary experience at the same time as celebrating the spirit of the Squamish, where life ties to surrounding nature, its culture, where narrative art by Squamish people empowers its history, and local materials by local businesses run and support the local economy. Next slide, please. So, the main exposure to the south, where maximized openings makes the design ideal in terms of green energy consumption. I'll expand on later. And no side of this project is sacrificed or neglected, and in fact, the design wraps the full building map. The idea of parametric and repetitive pattern in the design is directly taken from the nature around and Squamish Nation's culture of high art drawing, which again source back to the nature. And this sequential design not only enhances visual complications, but eliminates monotonous reading of the facade and creates kinetic parameter to design as a whole. And depending on the speed and direction, this experience will be diverse from individual passerby. So next slide, please. Globally, there are a lot of collaborations between steel, concrete, and wood industries to create hybrid technologies. And in this proposal, the main structure determined to be concrete as a durable and sustainable material for the purpose of industrial use and look. It is also local and recyclable material, while usually complies with the shear rock wall of the Squamish chief in its background. However, to warm the design, reflect natural color and adopt local material, we design rhythmic wooden canopy that defines each unit while covered with entrance bay as a better protection. Next image, please. On the left, you see the interior render of the first unit from east, and taking advantage of tree size exposure to the outside can be seen in this image, and 100% of units are dedicated to large open space plans. And the left image shows the same unit from outside, flagged with 7 sculptural icons from Queensway to support the whole design concept. Next image, please. So another architectural feature in the non-reflective glazing that allows daylight penetration into units, while emphasized by dark mullions. These dark colored lines are the integration of architectural sketch lines and inspired from totem technical drawing. Next, please. So here are material selections. Gypsum gray for the exterior walls is a light gray color to support its industrial look. But I should say a lighter color towards white, like pure white, from Benjamin Moore's same collection shall make the design more intriguing. For the canopy, exposed glulam timber to be dark painted on edge and backside match with the overall dark framing, and clear glass and brushed aluminum for the glass canopy, which we had it in the slide before, and black thermally broken aluminum frames, black solid panels, and clear glazing for all the openings, and finally brushed metal louver with a steel support for the garbage hut. Next slide, please. Okay, for the signage, the signage design for building names to be 10 inches extruded brushed aluminum pinned and mounted on each concrete facade, and unit numbers and business signs to be black aluminum blades with extruded cones pin mounted over and generally illuminated by a spotlight from above where the fin ends, as you can see in the middle with elevation, south elevation. Next slide, please. Okay, here are the elevations on I'd like to notice the shallow overall slope from east on the top and bottom elevation that defines the main and only site access, services both pedestrian and vehicular users from Queens Bay. And next slide, please. We should also continuously wrap the building, the access, wrap the building and make it accessible. And in addition to the unit plans that you can see in this image, there are 2 loading areas servicing the site, 32 parking stalls and 1 bicycle rack for the total of 6 bicycles covered by the extruded glass canopy from the building. And next slide, please. About environmental considerations, building's main exposure is to the south and takes the most advantage of the daylight in all seasons, absorb the sun's heat and energy during the winter, and stays cool in summer, relying on shade provided by overhang canopies, besides the depth of each unit. Second is the amount of vegetation and greenery in front and sides of the building. Building designed to be maximized as much as possible to minimize site runoff, although with so much restrictions that due to the pipeline and what Jesse explained earlier. And compact design, flat surface, and increased performance of the envelope considered to be to help the energy loss. Reduction of energy used by the most efficient fixtures and heat recovery system will be discussed with the engineers. And waste management to the construction and post-construction recycling management will be planned in diverting landfill. Other points are actually covered earlier. And next slide, please. I talked about shading, and the figure on the left explains this visually. Under white diagram, it explains all units benefit from outdoor openings on both south and north from green natural ventilation and access to daylight. Next slide, please. And finally, exposure to outside from all 4 sides of the building provides good local and neighborhood surveillance for this project and for the surrounding building. Next, please. So I would like to invite Colin to join if he would like to add anything about this project, and if not, I should invite Travis to present his part about landscape.
Travis involved in the landscape first, and then I'm sure there'll be questions that we can help answer. Travis, are you there?
Hello, can you see me? Can you hear me? Good,
there you are.
Good. Hello, I'm Travis Warren, the landscape designer on this project. I'm going to briefly cover the landscape goals and aspirations. Thanks for having me here. It's been a real pleasure working on this project. I found it really interesting. And can we go to the next slide? So I just wanted to start with this first slide to emphasize the Squamish River as an inspiring element and a great example of the rugged beauty of the West Coast I know we all really cherish. Next slide, please. So I'll start with circulation and connections and safety of the site. The landscape pathway layout is to be integrated into the overall community development, allowing for linkages to public sidewalks, bike paths, and roadways for cyclists, pedestrians, and vehicle movement. The main front asphalt pathway allows for accessible passage in and off the property on a straight, unobstructed, and non-slip flat surface. The path walks and rolls people through a heavily planted garden site. As for safety, it has been addressed using SEPTED principles. The site design marks out public, semi-private, and private spaces using landscape elements such as vegetation, fence screening, and surface materials. An example is a screening fence along the north side, separating private spaces and private pathways from the neighboring property. We have a small amenity space strategically located in the corner of the building, providing what's known as eyes on the street for the community surveillance and awareness. It's under a tree accessed by the public walkway. Its materials are simple: 2 logs sitting on river rock. That's Squamish River inspiration, the homage, I guess. It's also connected to the paved pedestrian path at the front of the building, giving 2 connections to the site. The planting design, our approach is based in community sustainability. We prioritize the resilient plant species list that is generally robust for local conditions, and it is bear aware. The best horticultural and architectural practices were applied to the project. We followed the right plant, right place mantra. We incorporate native and adapted plant species to perform best in each microclimate of the site. All areas of the site was designed for seasonal variety while regarding our summer droughts and winter rain seasons, which in Squamish is constant and it's on and it's off all the time. The plant species were chosen based on their tolerance, vigor, performance, and biodiversity for the future business development of this precinct. Another design goal was to enhance and create bird habitat on the property. We considered creating long-term opportunities for food, shelter, nesting sites, and water, crucial for a sustainable environment as a whole. Next slide, please. And I'd like to just finish off with the species chosen, the trees, which I just discussed. Here's an example of using columnar tree species for height stratification and being able to scale the site as a landmark in which the building sits within, which is the Squamish district. Let's say, as a landscape response, finishes my presentation.
Anything else, Jesse?
Nothing from me now.
John, I have one thing. Could I jump in with a quick procedural question to the applicant?
Yes.
There was a lot of mention of the Squamish Nation in the form and character of the building. I'm just wondering, was there sort of any engagement with the Squamish Nation on this design? And if no, then I would suggest that, you know, we probably should omit that from the minutes, because it, whenever we mention Squamish Nation, it's got to be genuine.
Sorry, I couldn't hear the last part. What was the question again?
So my question is whether there was any engagement with the Squamish Nation when you did the design of the building or the naming of the building, because it was referenced through your presentation.
Yes, actually, no, it wasn't any engagement, but as a multicultural community, I actually included many layers of different cultures. One was from First Nations, and the rest was from my own culture. I'm Persian, and the rest also was from different other. I can't bring it up if you'd like to.
That's okay. No, my question was specific to the Squamish Nation. So I would just recommend to the ADP when you're considering the minutes that we would omit any references.
Sure.
Okay.
We have no problem with that.
I think the point is just to be clear that there was no communication with Squamish First Nation on that particular representation. Yeah. Okay. With respect and appreciation for their wonderful artistic elements and culture. At this point, we would go to questions, and I'm going to reverse the order from the last meeting, and I'm going to start with Graham this time. First question.
Yeah, sure. Just a couple quick ones. Thanks for the presentation. Can you just clarify the bike parking? Is it just the 6, I think I heard 6 Class B spots in front?
That's right.
This is Colin here. There are 6 Class B spots in the front, and within each unit there is a Class A spot underneath the stairs. That does show up on the drawings.
Okay, didn't see that. Thanks.
No problem.
And then just second question about sustainability in your design rationale. You talk under building materials about recyclable content. Can you expand on that? Or strategy around that?
I think the key component that we were talking about is this is a concrete building with a metal roof. Most of the metal will have as high as recycled content as we can possibly find. And that's for the open web steel joists as well as for the main structural beams, and as well as the Q deck that forms the roof. Concrete, there is a certain amount of concrete that does get recycled in terms of whatever is involved in the crush. We will see what we can do about that as well.
So that's part of your strategy, is to pursue those 2 avenues?
Since they're the 2 major components in the building, yes, definitely.
Okay, those are my only questions.
Okay, thanks very much, Graham. Christina, would you like to ask questions?
Yes, hi. Thanks for the presentation. I just have a question. Sorry, I have to flip back and forth between Blue Jeans and my screen. Yeah, I just have a question about for the landscape. Am I looking at a gravel strip all around the outside of the building, and then just a little bit of, and then sort of lines of planting? Is that a gravel strip, like river rock or something?
There's 2 things there. There's a gravel strip, drainage strip around the building, as well as a pathway connecting the private backyards that you see on the north side.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay. And the only other question is, it's interesting, I'm looking at sort of your planting design and how you have the plants laid out on one side of the pathway in a very sort of formalized way, you know, in a kind of square pattern or linear pattern, and then on the other side is sort of naturalized. I'm just wondering if that was intentional, if that was something you were looking for, going for a certain look or something.
Part of that is because of the slope and how the pathway will shed water off, and also just the presentation both from the street and what the experience is like actually as like a garden path through a garden.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much. That's good for me.
Thanks, Christina. Carlos next.
Yeah, Yeah, so I appreciate the natural themes and cultural themes in your presentation, but that was kind of my immediate question, was the consultation with Squamish Nation members. So, Jonas, glad you asked that. You know, even down to the name with like the 7, which is a guttural stop as part of the name. I think that you may want to assess that in the context of meaningful consultation. You also made a statement, so switching gears entirely, when it comes to the color of the building, you made a bit of a statement about the gray versus the white. And can you clarify, is the main building colored gray or white? You kind of switched around the renderings a bit.
At first, when we submitted the project earlier with Jessie, I had it in white. Actually, later I changed it to gray because of keeping it industrial look. But I also still like to be white, and I left it for later decision, actually. But we display here as light gray.
Okay, thank you. And I guess another question on that. So the material in the soffit is wood, is that correct? And kind of the 7 overhang?
Pardon? It's, yes.
And then did you explore potentially bringing it down to the lower level canopy overhang as well, that same soffitting, as opposed to doing like a metal with the clear?
Are you talking about south elevation? Because we do have same canopy, but in lower level on the other side, which I don't have the I don't have the rendering. But yeah, this is covering the 2 floors, 2 levels, the total height of the building, but on the other side, it is just covering an end up of the level, at the level 1.
Okay, that's all my questions.
Okay. Thanks, Carlos. Sarah, next.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. Can you explain how the parking is not going to spill into the pedestrian walkway that runs along the front of the building? Because presumably there won't be curb stops there if you're going to be loading and unloading into those bays.
Correct. I'm going to let Travis take that one. Travis?
Yes, the nature of what's happening at the site is that vehicles will be able to drive and take packages in and out, so it acts more like a warehouse. So with a curb stop, having like a bobcat coming to pick up, pallets, something, just wouldn't work in this case.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but then how are the vehicles not going to infringe on the walkway that runs in the front of that building? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do understand what you're saying.
If they're too close to the building, then you can't pass.
Yes, that's another option as well, for sure.
I actually think I'm saying it's not an option, because if they're parked too close, then the whole point of the overhang is for naught, because you can't actually get
Yeah, no, I'm saying it's an option as in, it's assuming that people would drive right up to the building and then block off. It's my assumption that that's not what's going to happen, that people would leave a space to be able to walk, otherwise there wouldn't be any circulation.
So there'll be lines painted?
Yeah, so generally a type of signage would be used, and instead of using poles and then signage, which would add to more obstruction, using painted in the stalls of itself. So showing lines and text, that's another option to show.
Okay. Can you tell me what the dimensions of the washrooms are?
Sarah, the washrooms are they are accessible standards, so they are. I can't remember the exact dimension, but yeah.
Okay. And what are the slopes the internal slopes of the ramps on Unit 1 and 2?
I can't remember exactly, but they do fall within the acceptable parameters for ramps.
Right, but it can go from 5%, which is nothing, to 8.3, which is really hard.
Understood. We do have some flexibility when we get into the final grading of the site to make them as gentle as possible. But, yeah.
And can you tell me what the slope is of the pathway that leads down to Queensway?
Yeah,
there you go.
Go ahead.
Go for it, Travis.
Yeah, no, the pathway is less than 5%. It's like 4.35.
Okay. And then regarding the signage, now what you show on the signage package is brushed stainless on concrete. Is that what you're proposing to have on the building?
Yes, correct.
And you're proposing it at 10 inches?
Yes. 10 inches excluded from the surface.
It might be a little bit small.
Okay.
I will make my comments afterwards. Thanks very much. That's all my questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. We'll go to Mike now. Questions?
Yeah. Thanks for the presentation. So, a few of my questions have already been asked. In the sustainability and passive considerations section of your presentation, says building energy use, increased performance of the envelope, and reduction of the system's energy by using the most efficient fixtures and heat recovery systems. Can you just speak to what that means? I guess more, like, are you putting HRVs in the units? Is there, like, what does that mean?
We are anticipating putting a heat recovery type of ventilation system in the unit, in each unit for sure. The units also will be insulated to the latest ASHRAE standards or better, which will help with the cooling and heating loads if whatever's when we get there.
And then there's the diagram kind of explaining the idea of sort of like passive solar shading. Was there any sort of like sun path calculations or anything done for those, like the 7s that you've kind of got shading or possibly shading the upper windows? I'm guessing that diagram isn't necessarily for this building, it's just an idea of how it works.
Correct. It's the general idea.
But there wasn't any sort of calculation to see if those shades actually did anything as far as like shading for the building?
Not yet. No, we have not analyzed it to that detail yet.
Gotcha. The building materials locally sourced that's referenced, is that just sort of the concrete going into the building, or is there other ideas for like local suppliers of materials?
Definitely looking at, I'm not sure if I have their name right. There's an amazing wood supply place in Squamish, which we'll probably manufacture all the fins and the canopies from. And and also, I know that everybody's interested in sustainability, so I'll just put this in here for the reference sake, is that the mezzanines will be built out of wood, and we will be sourcing as much of that locally as we can as well.
And then my last question is sort of the 7, I guess maybe if you look at a side profile, they look like 7s. They kind of look like a radiator fin or something on the front of the building. Are those concrete, or are they like a hardy board over top of metal framing, or kind of what's that, what are those?
We were thinking that those were actually solid wood. There'd be cross-laminated lumber. So that's where we would be, that was the, I believe it's Taylorwood Industries or something like that, that we'd be trying to source that from as well.
Sorry, But I'm talking about the ones that look like concrete, are those?
Oh, the ones at the front,
Yeah, okay, yeah, those ones.
the ones on Queensway. They would be a cementatious material on top of probably a foam to give it the bulk, and then would be stuck on top of the concrete.
Oh, sorry, one other question. So there's the continuous, or it looks like a continuous overhang that Sarah was kind of talking about, people parking underneath. Is that continuous, or are there breaks between? I guess there's got to be a break because of the overhang thin, but is there a way for water to get between those, or is it sort of continuous from one end of the building to the other?
I think when we get there, it will be continuous. We'll have a piece of glass in front of the fin as well.
Okay, that's all my questions.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Going to go to Jenna next.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Good. So I'm just taking a look at the site plan, and it's noting an underground storage C-civil. I'm presuming that's looking at a rainwater management strategy. Could you speak a bit to how the rainwater is being worked through on the site?
That was designed by our civil engineer, so there should be a civil engineer in the package that you received as well. And I'm not that familiar with how the rainwater systems work, but I guess it is going to be. It's not all rushing into the system because of that underground storage tank.
Okay. You know if,
Go ahead.
I was going to ask if you knew if there were any limits or opportunities with having any rain gardens on the site.
That's what I could call.
Go for it, sure.
Yeah, I spoke with the civil engineer, really look if that was a possibility to look at, and part of it is the reinforcement for flooding, which is designed with the building and goes out of the landscape. It really took away any significant type of stormwater management. He looked at it as being able to take it off the surfacing of the parking lot and gather it together there. There really is just a limited landscape there.
Yeah, that's fair, definitely. Some sites can manage it, some are challenged with that, definitely. Speaking of that, there's, as we know, a lot of utilities on the site, and I presume that would affect your trees, but you do have trees planted in that area, so just hoping you could speak a bit to some of the limits that those utilities were causing, and how you sort of determine the tree locations according to that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question, because that's something we all together as a team really looked at on multiple occasions. There's so many site servicing utilities going through this site, and we weren't able to put one in that one island. It was just too close to a lot of the proposed new sanitary lines, but we made sure we're at least 2 meters away. I do understand that that line specifically is going to be 2 meters deep. And in the water line, we made sure that we planted things like grasses and whatnot. If ever needed to get into that part of the site, it could be easily opened and put back together.
Yeah, perfect. Great. And then my last question, I was hoping you could speak a bit to the movement patterns. There's, of course, being an industrial site, we need a lot of vehicles coming and dropping off and such. And just hoping you could speak a bit to these larger vehicles and how they would navigate and turn around and exit or what have you. That.
Colin, did you want to take that?
Sure. They are going to maneuver as best as they can. It's a very small site, and I think the idea is that we're providing spaces that they can pull over, and whether they back onto the site or they back off the site is what will happen.
Okay, thank you. All my questions.
Okay, thanks, Jenna. David?
Hello. Yeah. Can you explain the mezzanines? How are they working? They seem to be 40% in a couple of the units and then very quite large in units 3 to 7?
They all should be 40% as they're drawn right now.
I'm looking at the floor plan and they're not.
Sorry, are you thinking of units 3 to 7? The mezzanine is actually on the front of the unit, and then units 1, 2, and 8 mezzanines are on the back of the unit. So the dashed line, if you're looking at it, the mezzanine is actually on the, they are 40%, 100%.
Okay, well, that explains my next question about the staircases, because I can see how a staircase could turn back on itself and come up into space like that. So, okay. The loading zones, they appear to be across a slope. Is there any consideration for bringing pallets out of a loading zone on a 5% slope?
As much as we can, we've kind of made the slope there as gentle as possible, which is why there's a slight ramp going into units 1 and 2. And I think our experience doing other industrial sites is that in reality, when we get there, the slope will be acceptable if it is within that 5% range.
Okay, and then you're expecting the trucks or vehicles to parallel park to be able to unload and load?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And then your bike placement appears to be in front of the loading zones and opposite a roller door for Unit 3. Is that being worked through?
They're not directly in the path of that roller door. They're just right in between the two units.
Okay, so I'm looking at bike parking spaces that appear in front of Unit 3 that cross the front roller door. That's also going to have a loading bay there.
Oh, sorry. So yes, the bike spaces are behind the loading space. Yes.
And in front of the roller door of Unit 3.
They shouldn't be in front of the roller door. They are actually missing the roller door. I'm not sure if that was, the architectural drawing should be correct. The landscape drawing may have it off.
Okay, I was looking at L1. Okay. The end 2 units, they have a raised garage door. Could you maybe talk about how they're going to use that to load in and out of?
It's like a very small loading dock. We don't have any other way around that in this particular site location. So it will have to have safety paint on the inside to make sure people understand that when the doors are open, they can't fall out, that kind of type thing.
Okay. You spoke about the sustainability a lot, and could you maybe talk about what the actual insulation level is of the concrete panels? I don't want to keep everyone too long, but there's 2 possible ways this building may be built. We originally were going to do it with concrete precast panels, which is a sandwich panel. So they're roughly 3 inches of concrete on the outside, rigid insulation, and maybe another 3 inches of concrete on the inside, which is a great way to build a building because then we don't have to use drywall, drywall is being a very intensive energy consumption in terms of the building material. However, that may or may not be possible because of the supply of that. So we were possibly going to do it with a tilt panel, which is a little bit of a bigger panel. It's about 7 or 8 inches of concrete, and then the rigid insulation on the inside, and then drywall on the inside of that. I'm not entirely sure how that's going to pan out until we kind of get into the construction side of things. But in either case, the insulation would be continuous on the inside of the building, which is up to the latest ASHRAE standards in the BC Building Code. And on the roof, we will have rigid insulation on top of the continuous rigid insulation on top of the steel deck. So it's to be built in any case. Okay. The wood look of the fins, the renderings seem to show like a light wood, and the material palette shows a kind of chestnutty wood. Which one is it?
The chestnutty color, as you call it. The renderings were done before we could finalize the material selection. So it was so the latest in the presentation package in the slides, if you noticed really quickly, they were the right chestnut color. But yeah.
Okay, perfect. With any consideration given to sort of colouring the concrete fins that you have on Queensway, or any decoration there?
That was asked and requested by the planning and Shahrzad and I both would like to keep the same color as so that the building looks like it's made out of the same material.
Okay. And the last one, I guess, is more of a landscape question, but was there any consideration given to the fact that the access path from, it appears to be sort of like a hard right, hard left. Any consideration given this the sort of the angle of that?
Yeah, I know what you mean by that. The one at the west side, close to the building, is a landing, and it does come out the pathway that goes along the building itself. The other one as well, it's a landing it's a right, but it's not like a 90-degree angle. It's more like a 75. And I made it quite, the width, I extended the width just so there's not like to allow for a radius of, strollers, wheelchairs, and any other type of mobility transportation. It's just otherwise it'd just be a really long path.
Yeah, no worries.
No comment.
I think that's my question. My connection seems to be a bit choppy here, but yeah, that's all my questions. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much, David. I have two quick ones. One, is there some kind of security fence or gate plan for the that back gravel pathway, and I'm looking at the top northeast corner of the building to the property line? There's a line drawn there. I'm not sure if it's a fence, but just curious.
There's no gate there.
We're not anticipating a security gate at this point in time. That is also an access path to get into the mechanical and electrical rooms at the back of the building.
Okay.
And also an emergency exit path for coming out the back of the building.
Yeah, and then it runs into some planting and whatnot where it ends. So it doesn't really lead onto a passable sort of walkway in through. I'm looking at the landscaping plan now, which is okay, but it just if you're expecting that to be an access pathway, you don't want people walking through the gardening.
The access would be around the other side on the west, behind the garbage shed.
Yeah. Okay. And the other one is the interior partitions. Assuming somebody takes 3 or 4 units and wants to combine them, is that planned for in the structural design? That the interior walls can be taken down? Non-bearing, in other words?
That's correct. Most of these buildings are built with steel columns in the middle and infilled in between with 6-inch steel studs that are 20 feet long.
Okay. Anyone else with any other questions? If you want to throw hands? No? Graham?
Thanks. Just really quickly, on your last page of your design rationale under active design, you talk about outdoor circulation and providing ample outdoor amenity space in front of the building that encourages outdoor meetings and interactions. Just looking at the site plan and the landscape plan, I can't find that. I'm wondering if you could point it out.
On the L1, shows essentially our pathways and the amenity space at the southeast corner of the building.
Okay, that's what that is. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
We may have exaggerated a little tiny bit about the ample side.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it ample, but thanks.
Thanks, Graham. So we will go on to comments, and I think we start with you, actually, Graham. Ready?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, always struggle a bit with industrial buildings and how much I have to say, but appreciate, I guess, some of the thought that's gone into some of the awnings and the 7 expression. It's a nice touch. I think the bike storage in the front, you're doing what's required of you. I think it would be great if you could offer a bit more if there's space, you know, encourage people to ride there and perhaps offer some weather covering for those spots. It seems to be in a challenging location if it's right in front of the loading zone, so if you're able to shift it, I think that's more accessible. You're not going to have conflicts or trucks accidentally mowing down those 6 spots. Other than that, sustainability is still pretty notional, so I'd encourage you just to really kind of dive into that and clearly articulate what your strategy is and how you're going to do some of these things. Yeah, that's really all I have to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Graham. We go to Christina next.
Great, thanks. I really like the look of the building. I think you've put a lot of thought into it, especially, as Graham said, you know, for an industrial building. The articulation of those awnings is quite nice. The white color, I think, is quite stunning. I'm not sure how it would translate into reality, staying white, for instance. But I do like that the contrast is quite nice. As far as the landscape goes, I like the addition of this little corner area where you're talking about the sugar maple with the berm and the logs, and I think that's a nice entry feature, and it's also very simple. So I really appreciate that. I'm a little concerned just about when I asked you the question about the planting that's on, a very linear pattern. Unless that's very well maintained, sometimes, when you plant something intentionally in lines and some of the plant material doesn't survive, it can look like something's missing. So I would just caution that maybe we didn't talk about irrigation or, I'm assuming there's irrigation for the site, but I would highly recommend it. And also that you have a good maintenance program in place if you plan on planting in these very linear patterns. That's it.
Yeah. Carlos next.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. My feelings generally about these buildings are that they serve a purpose, and that purpose is affordable space for employment. So I tend to trend on the side of not requiring these to meet all of the wonderful standards that we want a lot of our other buildings to meet. I think the residential products are where we can really push down that carbon footprint, and for these we can maybe have them carry a bit more of the weight, although I think it's important that where possible these buildings are looked at with some alternative solutions. And so I encourage you to explore wood as a potential option for the entire building, and if you could do that and come at the same prices as Hilltop, maybe you'll be the ones to start the revolution for that in Squamish. So I challenge you on that one. But yeah, I don't have any significant comments for the building. I think you've done the appropriate amount for the building's purpose. So that's all from me.
Thanks, Carlos. Sarah next.
I actually muted myself instead of, sorry about that. So my comments are around with the signage, being that the signage on the building will be viewed from 9 meters or more, you need to have your numbering to be at least 300 millimeters high. So you've got to bring it up another 1.5 inches, like about 11.5 inches. Also, brushed stainless on a gray background isn't really high enough contrast, particularly like we've got some vehicles driving by, so I just encourage you to have a bit more contrast there. I do like the high contrast of the white as opposed to the gray with the building. Maybe you could just go with a darker brushed stainless. And then as to the units 1 and 2 that have the internal ramping, I think unit number 1, you won't probably have any space to extend that ramp because of the landing at the bottom of the stairs. But unit 2, you might be able to stretch it out a bit if it's, a bit steep. And because both of those units will, when their doors are up, you should have a tactile strip in yellow that goes along the edge to be a warning for anybody with visual impairment that there's a drop-off. So that comes in bright yellow and would serve your purpose. And then finally, the ramp going down to the road, that end turn is, despite the ramp only being, 4 or 5%, the sidewalk isn't very wide, so coming down with wet rims, if you lose control, you're going right into traffic. So I would rather see it extended, just be straight, and so that at least then you're running out along the sidewalk and not on a very short pathway that leads you straight off the curb into the traffic. And that's all my comments. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Mike, next.
Just a couple comments. It's similar to what Graham and Carla said in that, I'm not sure if we were supposed to hold this as sort of the same standard as maybe the presentation we just saw, as far as all the guidelines go. But I think because you've included so much, there's a whole page about sustainability and passive considerations in your presentation. I hope that that's not sort of just in there to address that, but it's not something that you're actually going to implement into the building. I hope that's actually something that you're going to take into account, especially with sort of the shading and that. If you're putting it in the presentation, I hope that when you get further down the road and you're looking at building this, that that doesn't just get tossed out. And because I think those overhangs, to be able to have the effect that you're thinking they're going to have an effect on the glazing for shading, they're going to be really big. But I'm not an expert, so I'm not 100% sure on that. And I also feel like cross-sections would probably be helpful to better understand what we're looking at. I'm not sure, maybe I just missed them, but David kind of brought it up. I didn't know what I was looking at as far as the mezzanines go either. I was kind of confused. I think a cross-section probably would have made it clear as to what was going on inside the building. Other than that, it's nice to see something different. I mean, it's a concrete box that's been dressed up a little bit from the outside, and I can appreciate the effort in dressing it up. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Jenna, next.
So thanks again for a great presentation. In terms of form and character, I echo the comments. I think it's a building that really does a really good job in breaking up the box and creating a character that's really nice. It's really nice to look at. I think it's going to work out really well. I'm always a big fan of color, so I think I may be alone in that one. So, but I'm a little bit hesitant to the grays, but that's just a personal preference. That's fine. I really appreciate the efforts with rainwater management. It's nice to see that that's being considered. Really appreciating that this site is limited given its location in the floodplain, but it's nice to see that approach. And to that, with the limitations of the utilities, I appreciate that a lot of effort has gone in to find locations for those trees as much as possible. And as you move through into more detailed design, hopefully that approach will continue. It's really nice to see. In terms of the outdoor amenity space, I would really encourage consideration to that area with the logs and the pea gravel, to take another pass at that and maybe create a space that's a bit more offering opportunity for gathering, maybe a surface that is
easy to walk on, whether it be a crushed gravel or a unit paver, and some nice seating in that area so people can really linger and spend some time out there, have their lunch break or what have you. I think would become very valued by the users of this building. And I would echo Sarah's comments in giving just another look at the ramp and just making sure that that navigation down and its relation to the street is given a second look. Overall, a great project, and thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jenna. David now.
Hi there. Yeah, I echo the other comments that it's sort of made good inroads into decorating what is otherwise an industrial building. Just to reference staff comments, I don't know if the landscaping setback is supported or not, but my personal opinion is I wouldn't necessarily support the removal of the landscape buffer. I think it's important maybe for the panel members to sort of think when an applicant is saying that the site is tight, the tightness of this site is only sort of being exacerbated by the applicant maximizing the size of its building. So I personally think it's unfair to use that as a limit to landscaping boundaries, breaking up parking and other considerations of DPA 3. Overall, I would just say it's a very uncoordinated package. It's very difficult for us to assess, separate drawings, white elevations, different renders, materials differing from renders. It doesn't give the view to me of like a sort of coordinated package. I do like the applicant's use of the wood fins and the landscaping in the front, so I think that brings colour. I think the bike spaces, which other people have talked about, I think they're in the wrong place, and although it is maybe the minimum, it would definitely benefit from more space, especially if there are backcountry breweries, that sort of things doing there. And I think the pedestrian access really hasn't been resolved. I think there will be a lot of conflicts between tenants, users, bicycle users, people unloading. It's just a bit of a mess along that front, to be honest. And then the next thing is just close to my heart, sustainability. And I think that the sustainability of the build is kind of tedious at best, which wouldn't have been a problem, but it was just mentioned so much. It was, reiterated that this was recyclable content, that there was shading, but there was no real information provided as to, other than that, natural steel has recycled content in it, and that, the fins would provide some shading. So it's kind of like an all or nothing for me. If you're going to say a building is sustainable, you have to provide information as to how it achieves that. Just as Mike mentioned, I agree a section would have been really valuable to work out if cross ventilation was truly possible, and we could have seen these mezzanines. And overall, I'd really like to see a more coordinated final set so that the panel could actually see what material. Is it white? Is it grey? Are the materials light wood, dark wood? Are the fins aluminum or are they white, as the renderings are? And then lastly, the naming issue. I really think they should either have Squamish Nation full buy-in and consultation or make no references. I think it's slightly disingenuous to have a Squamish Nation reference on a concrete industrial building, and it could lead to some issues there. Okay? Thanks.
Thanks, David. I think it's a project that has done well with the challenges of the site. And I've said this before, I'm not a fan of pseudo-retail industrial. And I see that that's kind of where this is going. This actual area and part of the industrial park has somehow been directed towards this type of thing. I think if you want to have a proper industrial use or production use, you need to have more yard, you need to have better circulation, and there's too much building for the site for that particular type of use. Then if it's not that use, you end up with something that's going to basically be a shopping center down there. And that has its own issues and problems that I don't think we're considering very well in that neighborhood. But those are bigger questions. So for this project, I think you've done what you can with the site. I think it looks very nice, and it's attractive in that sense. Absolutely agree with the bicycle comments. Maybe you want to put them towards the front of the property where they're in full view so that nobody can mess around with the bikes, or less likely to. Security is always something nice to think about, but near the loading bay is just not going to work at all for my experience with people loading and unloading trucks and whatnot. Does anyone else have any other comments before we go to the question?
Could we maybe ask staff what their comments are about the variances? That they didn't say in the report if they were supportable or not.
Jesse, can we call on you for that?
Yeah, of course. The variance to the parking island is supportable. You can't put a parking island there. And at this point, we had considered the landscape buffer on the south as supportable, again, because of the statutory right-of-way there.
Yeah, in that sense, I would just add a comment that I absolutely agree with Carlos. As far as industrial should be really focused on functionality and cost efficiency so that it can be affordable rather than the fancy frills. So that lends itself to one of those variances. So any other comments before the question? No more? Okay, so I'm going to read the recommendations once again. Potential recommendations. A, that the advisory design panel supports the project as presented and does not need to see this project returned for further review. B is that the advisory design panel supports the project as presented and would like the applicant to work with staff to resolve the following recommendations. C, that the advisory design panel supports the project as presented and would like the applicant to resolve the following recommendations and return to present a revised project. And D is that the advisory design panel does not support the project as presented for the following reasons. Any suggestions on which recommendation?
I can move B.
Okay. And anyone want to second that?
Yeah, I would.
Sarah? Okay. So I'll call the question for recommendation B. Anyone against? No hands. So one against. That would be David. Okay. So in general, we've passed B through. So B is adopted. Any comments on any specific recommendations that go that are more important than others? No. So we'll just go with our notes as far as our recommendations in our comments. Very good. Any other questions or comments before we wrap up? Okay. Well, thanks very much to the proponent for a thoughtful presentation.
Thank you, John, and we appreciate everybody being here. I know that this is a long day for all of you guys.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I don't think we have any other items on the agenda here unless somebody has anything that they want to discuss from the group. No? Okay, so can I have someone move for a termination of the meeting? Sarah is moving, David is second, and all in favor, or anyone against? Have a great evening, guys, and thank you very much.